So why does everything still feel so expensive around here in the United States right now? Even though inflation fell to 3.4% in July, because lower inflation does not mean the prices already that have increased have returned to their old levels. The official report shows that prices rose only 0.1% during July. Grocery prices declined slightly. Gasoline prices also fell during the month. Those are encouraging developments. But come on, we all knew I was going to put a big fat but in there. And here it is. Gasoline was still nearly 25% more expensive than this year. Restaurant prices are up 3.4%. Airline fares are up more than 25%. Today, we are breaking down what actually became cheaper, what remained expensive, and why the Federal Reserve now faces a difficult choice between inflation that remains above its target and labor that appears to be weakening. Welcome to Money and Politics Simplified, where we separate the headline from the numbers and show you what they actually mean. Please remember to like, follow, and share. The Bureau of Labor and Stats reported that consumer prices increased 0.1% in July and after declining 0.4% in June. Measured over the previous 12 months, inflation eased from 3.5 to 3.4. Core inflation, which excludes the more volatile food and energy categories that we all really care about, increased 0.2% during July and eased from 2.6% to 2.5% annually. These results were close to what economists expected. They showed that the rapid price increases experienced earlier in the year continued moderating. But inflation remains above the Federal Reserve's long-running 2% objective, and the report contains important differences between what happened during July and what consumers experienced over the entire year, which is trash, let's be honest. Suppose a grocery item increased from $4 to $5. If its price later increased by only 1 cent, inflation has slowed dramatically because it was only 1 cent increase. But the item still costs approximately $5. That is what many households are experiencing right now. Inflation measures the rate at which prices are changing. It does not tell us that the overall price level has returned to levels where it was years ago. When inflation decreases, but prices are still rising, economists call that disinflation. Deflation is different. Deflation means the overall price level is actually declining. July's report showed disinflation over the year, not broad deflation. Big difference, right? Yeah, you might want to replay this part. Therefore, politicians should not say that prices generally came down merely because the annual inflation rate declined. A more accurate statement is that prices continued rising, remember that 1 cent, but a slower annual rate that has kept the economy in the state it is in. Food prices increased 0.1% overall during July, but food purchased for the home, the grocery category, declined 0.1%. The combined category for meats, poultry, fish, and eggs decreased 0.7%. Pork declined 1.5%. I love my bacon. And lettuce dropped sharply during the month, probably because of that Taco Bell explosive diarrhea thing. That was horrible. That provides some real relief, let's be honest, not the Taco Bell thing. But every grocery category did not improve. Non-alcoholic beverages increased 0.9% in July and were 4.1% more expensive than a year earlier. So yes, your favorite soda did cost more. Total grocery prices remain at 2.7% higher than in July of 2025. The monthly decline is welcome, but 1 month does not erase the whole year that the family had to absorb these prices. Consumers will need several months of stable or declining grocery prices before the difference becomes substantial in the household budget. The report also shows why families may experience inflation differently depending on where they eat. Case in point, example, grocery prices declined slightly during July, but restaurant prices increased 0.3% over the previous year. Food away from the home became 3.4% more expensive. I believe that because I paid $40 at Waffle House. But at Waffle House, depending on what time you go, it could be a dinner and a show, AKA, Are You Ready to Rumble? I take my wife to the nicest places. But both limited service restaurants and full service restaurants recorded annual increases of approximately 3.3%, upwards to 3.4%. Restaurant prices include more than the food itself. It reflects wages, rent, insurance, utilities, transportation, and other operating expenses. Therefore, falling prices for certain grocery items did not automatically produce an immediate decline on restaurant menus, and probably will not for the next couple of months. A family cooking meals at home may have experienced modest relief in July, not very much. A family relying heavily upon restaurants or takeout may not have noticed any movement at all in savings. You probably didn't. Gasoline prices declined 2.9% during July. That decrease helped keep the overall monthly inflation rate low, but gasoline was still 24.6% more expensive than it was a year earlier. Both statements are true. Gasoline became cheaper compared with June, but remained dramatically more expensive compared with July of 2025, the previous year. The last year, the gas was kind of reasonable. That distinction explains why a favorable inflation report may not match what drivers feel at the pump. I'm going to tell you right now, it doesn't. The entire energy index declined 1.5% during July, but energy prices remained 4.7% higher over the year. Electricity was up 4.2% annually, and natural gas was up 4.3%. Energy also remains vulnerable to international conflict, oil supply interruptions, refinery problems, disruptions involving shipping routes, or maybe bombing ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Maybe that thing. 1 month of declining gasoline prices does not eliminate those risks or those price hikes. Shelter prices increased only by 0.1% during July, but that category accounted for approximately 2/3 of the total monthly increase. Shelter was still 3.2% more expensive over the year. Better get those tiny homes. Medical care prices increased 0.4% during July. Hospital services rose 0.5%, while prescription and drug prices declined 0.8%. Used car prices increased 0.4%. Motor vehicle insurance declined 0.3%, save on Geico, providing some relief after years of pressure in that category. Airline fares increased 2.2% during July and were 25.5% higher than the 1 year earlier. Good God, that's high. This is why the national average can feel different from an individual's household experience. Someone who did not purchase an airline ticket avoided that increase. Someone who drives long distances experienced gasoline prices directly for the long trip. Someone renewing a lease may be affected more by shelter costs than a temporary decline in that lettuce or pork. The Federal Reserve now faces pressure. We all know that from opposite directions. Inflation has cooled, but it remains above the Fed's objective. At the same time, the July employment report showed payrolls declining by 23,000 jobs. The unemployment rate was 4.1%, but participation was also low, and the previous job estimates for May and June were revised downward by a combined 103%. I spoke about the unemployment rate earlier this week. You should go and check out that segment. If the Feds keep interest rates too high or raises them further, where it risks weakening employment, borrowing, housing, and business investment. If it relaxes policy too quickly, inflation could accelerate again, especially if energy prices rise. The Fed's preferred inflation measurement is the Personal Consumer Expenditures Index, not CPI like everyone thinks it is. That means today's report is important evidence, but it does not automatically decide what officials will do at their September meeting. I think this won't do anything. They will examine employment, wages, spending, financial conditions, and additional inflation data. But at the end, my personal opinion, they're not going to do anything. The administration can accurately say annual inflation declined and monthly price growth was modest. Critics can accurately say inflation remains above 2% target and that many essential costs remain elevated for its constituents. The dishonest version from either direction would ignore half of that evidence and tell you one side. It would be misleading to say inflation is surging based upon the particular monthly report. It would also be misleading to say the cost of living problem has been solved because It hasn't. Gasoline remained nearly 25% more expensive than the year earlier. It hurts me to say it every time, but groceries declined slightly during the month and core inflation eased. The responsible conclusion is not determined by which political party benefits. It's determined by numbers. Inflation cooled. Yes. Prices remain high. Duh. Yes. The labor market weakened. Yes. And Federal Reserve still faces substantial uncertainty. A big fat yes. July's inflation report is progress, not victory. The 0.1% monthly increase is encouraging because it didn't go any higher, like 6%. The decline in grocery prices is encouraging. The easing of headline and core annual inflation is encouraging. But consumers are still living with accumulated price increases and major expenses such as gasoline, airfare, restaurant, shelter, utilities remain elevated. Do not confuse slower price increases over time with restored affordability. And do not judge the economy through one number alone. Look at the whole picture. Let me ask you this. Are low inflation readings starting to help your household, or are prices still rising faster than your income? I just like to hear it. I'm Esco Latimer, and this is Money and Politics Simplified. Stay informed, stay engaged, because when you understand the money, my friends, you understand politics. Have a good day.